Good evening and happy Monday to anybody who might be listening. I hope you all had a relaxing and prayerful weekend. I had an opportunity to spend some time with my parents at a lake cabin in Minnesota. I tell you what, there's nothing that beats a lake cabin in Minnesota or North Dakota in August. Just perfect summertime living right there. And we had the opportunity to sit down and play one of our favorite family card games with my parents and my brother, a game of spades. And that just got me ruminating on how important it is and kind of reflecting on uh, my experience playing games of all sorts, but especially card games. And part of that reflection was that we had to teach my brother how to play spades again. He um, apparently does not have a very good memory of the rules and all of that. Um, it seemed like we were starting from scratch there. And my brother's a decently intelligent fellow, but if you've ever tried to teach somebody from scratch on a card game, it's um, it's kind of a flood of information. It's kind of a flood of details coming at you at that time, and it's hard to pick out what the most important things that you should be paying attention to are, and what relevance they have. If somebody gives you a rule, how strictly do you apply that rule? All those sorts of things. And that got me thinking about just the way that games function, I think, especially pedagogically, especially in how we learn how to navigate the world, especially as children. And, Jean Piaget was quite famous for having a very systematic view of games, understanding of the psychology of games and development. I'm not attempting to offer that tonight, but I do just have one thought with games and childhood development there, and maybe the most important thing that games provide for children is lessons in how to orient themselves towards a goal. How to orient yourselves towards a goal. Don't get tagged. Don't be it. Try and get your pieces to the end of the board. Um, go hide and see if you can be the last one to be found by the person who's seeking. These sorts of games, and at that level, they're very simple games. Certainly something suitable for children, but it does give them an opportunity to navigate the world in a engaging way, with a clear end and goal in mind. So we could take something like tag. You can get children who are very small to be able to play tag. It teaches them how to navigate around other players, right? How to navigate around any obstacles, how to find the boundaries of the area, and how to negotiate, rules and disputes about rules, which might actually be the most important thing that they learn about that. Can somebody just claim that the tree is base without having discussed that previously? That's a very important and pressing question when you're in the middle of a game of tag there. And when you level up in games, right, when it can go from just being an individual game to a team game, something that you have to cooperate with other players with, that gives you another level of understanding and orienting towards a goal, uh, that you now have to cooperate with your teammates. And you might notice that, maybe you're not the best on the team. Maybe you have to take kind of second place to somebody who's more skilled than you. It might teach you a little bit of humility. Now, if you are the top of the team, that usually means you end up being chosen captain, like on a football team in high school. The top players are usually the captains. And so, along with their added skill and prestige, you'll find people have to take further responsibility. And that's actually a pretty good preparation for the way that the world works. In theory, if you're good at your job, you should be given greater responsibilities. All of this ability to do that has to come from being able to keep what your purpose is what your telos is, what your final cause is at the top of your mind. When you forget about that, allow yourself to get distracted by the other players, allow yourself to get distracted by your own emotions and your own reaction to something elating or disappointing in the game, then you begin to play worse. And you have to learn how to regulate yourself so that you can use all of the powers at your disposal to reach for that final cause. And I think that's what makes learning a card game and playing those first hand or two difficult, because you don't have a clear sense of how playing a particular card is going to get you towards the final goal. You might sit there and try and remember the rules, and it's like that is an important thing there, and you might struggle seeing how all of these individual rules, all of these individual tips and tricks actually relate to that final goal. You'll only be able to play that card game well if you are able to see every hand and every move in your every hand relating towards the goal of the game. Of this is how we're going to score points. This is how we're going to defeat the other team. This is how we're going to win, and all of that. This gets us to a final point, and a thing that we talk about quite frequently on this channel and on other relating channels is a meaning crisis. Now, a meaning crisis is nothing more than completely losing sight of the final cause of your life. Not being able to nest all of the other little goals that you might strive after towards one grand overarching narrative of your life. And, oftentimes the universe and the way that the universe makes sense. And there might be more than one way to get yourself in a meaning crisis. But if you ever find somebody who's lost, find somebody who doesn't know how to begin to navigate and orient their lives towards a meaningful purpose, a meaningful telos, a meaningful final cause, you may want to ask them how they feel about games. Are they still able to play games? Are they still able to enjoy games? And if they've really gotten themselves into a lost place, maybe the best thing that you can do is teach them how to play a card game, welcome them into a team card game. Maybe you don't want to start with hearts. Hearts can be kind of brutal, but spades or pinochle or euchre or one of these team games, that might be a great non-threatening way to reach somebody who might find themselves in a position where they can't see the final purpose of their life. They can't see the final goal of their life. Maybe they've lost the ability to keep a final purpose and a final goal in their mind. And maybe if they were able to practice in a smaller, less high stakes, more relaxed environment, it would regain that ability. It's just a possibility, but I think there is a potential connection between games and meaning crises. And I'd love it if you guys popped on to this StreamYard, and we talked about that. Mark claims that the Outer Banks was pretty darn good last week. I'm not saying that there are no pleasant places outside of Minnesota, but man, Minnesota's got some arguments there. Jesus praised the bench warmers. Yes, as long as they know, as long as you know that you're a bench warmer, everybody understands that that's going to happen. Yeah, you're not necessarily going to be held account for that.
I like this topic, Father, and you're finally on it. I'm glad someone got there. It's taken many, many years, but so you brought up all the main themes, right? The meaning crisis is primarily caused by a loss of telos or final cause. Where's the banner, sir? Where's the banner? It's your banner. I mean, come on, you're kind of slipping.
We're good.
I mean, maybe you're not missing it, but the point you didn't make is, even if you have a final cause, you have to have this skill of connecting you with that final cause. And you can lose that skill.
Mm-hmm.
That's the issue. This is what everyone's missing, right? And so This is why when you have people that are in a crisis of faith, Peterson can get them out. When you have people in a meaning crisis, they go into a cult. That's basically what happens. Not perfectly, because the ones we cultivated, we'll say, did not do that. So that might not be a coincidence. We might actually know what we were doing. But we had some excellent work by Dr. Vervaeke to draw from and improve upon, because boy, did it need some improvements. Not very many, to be fair to him, but also he didn't make any, that's for sure.
Mm-hmm.
So you can't flood somebody with the rules all up front, because it's not how you learn the rules to begin with, right? You learn rules in pieces.
Like you learn why taking a hand when you're going nil in spades is bad, because everybody looks at you and is like, oh, that was a mistake.
Yeah.
Played that card. Like that's
Right.
That's how you learn what this really means. And then you watch your score go down by 140 or 150 points. Like, oh boy, going nil, that's high risk, high reward. And if you don't play your cards right, if your partner doesn't play their cards right.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And so there's a number of skills, but you can flood people out. You can give them that cognitive overload by trying to give them all the rules at once. Because nobody learns all the rules at once. And then Peterson sort of hints at this.
What you do is you play a couple practice hands.
Well,
we're talking just card games, right? Play the game.
But Peterson talks about this, right? Kids don't know the rules. But if you ask all of them how to play, you will get a full rule set. Right. And that's also distributed cognition. See, all these things are linked.
But it's probably, the rules are probably distributed according to a Pareto distribution.
Probably.
Like, how much you want to bet, like, out of a group of 9 kids, 3 of them know all the rules and the other 6 are going to...
None of them know all the rules. At a certain age, none of them know. They can't hold it. See, this is where everybody falls down. So just listening to Peugeot's newest video, where he's like, well, you can try to understand the perspective of your enemy. And I'm like, well, except that's not true for most people ever. And it never will be. I mean, that's the caveat. Like, some small group of people probably follows the Pareto distribution, by the way, like every other freaking thing, can do that. Most people can't understand any other perspective other than their own. And the question is, what do we do about those people? Right. And this is why I want to have Peugeot on. I want to say, you don't understand. Like, the flat myths that come out of World War II, and in this case, we can just do the flattest versions of those, quote, myths, which I will call stories, because they're not, in fact, myths. See my video on this topic. Those stories, we'll just call them comic book stories, because you can. Right. And maybe the upgrade to the comic book version of the story is Star Wars. Sure, absolutely. Right. All the themes, say, core themes of propaganda, and comic books were used for propaganda.
Oh, right? Captain America #1 had Captain America punching Hitler in the face.
Right. Like, it's not that hard to figure out. Right. This is why I don't understand why people aren't, like, pointing this out. It's really, really awkward. Right. So people need that, not just children, but also children need that. And the problem of children is one of the driving factors in the construction of the so-called perfect city or just city in Plato's Republic. Why these people claim they read the book, I don't know. Maybe you read the book and you were a little stupid, or maybe you skipped over a part and didn't notice. I don't know, man. But, like, it's fantastically important for Plato. It justifies a bunch of the moves he makes in the Republic that otherwise make no sense, right? And it's very much the point of the cave. You can see on Navigating Patterns, Lies of Plato's Cave, to figure out what it actually means, which isn't that hard if you just read what he wrote instead of reading into it some ridiculous story that is insane, and comes out of the myth of World War II, by the way, which actually Jonathan did a good job of pointing out. But if you don't step people in and let them sit at the level that they're at, then you can't get them unified. So there's a need to tell, we'll say, the stupid version of the story. and then a slightly smarter version of the story, and then an even smarter version, right? You need all of those stories to hold all of the people together who aren't at the top 10%. Right? And of course, the academics will think they're at the top 10%, and almost none of them are. Don't realize that. Mainly because, and I do have an animation on this. I'm working on another animation now. It's not going so well, but the main way to think about this is to say, oh, the people at the top only see other people at the top. Like they have no idea how far down the slide goes. They don't
Yeah,
know.
that's a problem. I've often thought about kind of my experience of the some of the parishes that I've been at, and really feeling like it was kind of a bougie a bougie middle class experience at this suburban parish, and it's like, like I'm gonna offer the service to everybody who shows up. And if these are the people who are here, then fine. I'm not going to drive them out or anything. But it's supposed to be a little bit of here comes everybody.
Yeah.
I kind of want to respond to this one right here. I don't think you actually need to be able to see things from another person's point of view in order to have society and fellowship. I think the way that actually comes about is you have the same goal, the same telos, and that
And
is
trust.
what and trust. Yeah, trust hopefully builds over time. That is what enables these sorts of things. You don't have to be able to do. I mean, it's like you think about, like, people think like, oh, I can see your point of view. Maybe every once in a while that's actually a little bit easy. Like you did something and you didn't notice it, but when it was pointed out to you, you realize that if that very same thing was done to you, you'd find it very offensive,
Right.
and you apologize for it. So
Right.
that's like a little way right there. But
Yep.
like another point of view could be a Russian, and God bless them, the Russian people are not like the American people. Like we're kind of different. So there was a poll taken recently, and it showed like Russian happiness and satisfaction with their direction of their society at being all-time highs, despite the rather expensive war that's going on right now. And if you remember American satisfaction during the invasion of Iraq, that was like a tumultuous period for us.
Yeah.
So all that to say that other people and other peoples can have a very different point of view on these things. It would take an incredible amount of work to be able to inhabit the point of view of another culture.
Well, and imagine the arrogance of thinking you can understand somebody else's point of view, because you're saying I'm as smart as I am and as smart as you are. And it's like, that's not likely to be true in many cases. There are conditions where that might be likely to be true, right? But probably not, right? Like probably
Empathy.
default, nah. I'm going to go with nah.
Yeah, I have a friend who likes to say, "I know how, like, what you've been through and where you've been, and there aren't many who've been through what I've been through in terms of early childhood trauma and whatnot." And knowing he hasn't gone through such, it's just like every time he says it, I'm like, "Dude, you can't say that. You don't know what other people have been through."
See, here's the important point, right? Those are exactly the same people. The guy who says, I feel like you need to be able to understand somebody else's point of view is precisely the guy who will say, you don't understand my point of view. They are the same people. And while that could be true in some cases, again, 10%, and you ain't in the 10%. Sorry, kid. Right? It's almost certainly not true. And it's kind of obnoxious to hold both positions at once. Even if it were true, I certainly wouldn't tell anybody, because that would be rude, if nothing else. But they are precisely the people that will tell you both things at the same time to your face and think nothing of it.
Yeah. The appropriate way to respond is oftentimes like, man, that sounds awful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's hard for people to, in the age of this empathy, which is the modern idea or recent idea of empathy is based around there's no hidden knowledge. Everybody can know everything, right? It's all age of gnosis. Knowledge is proposition stuff. And it's bizarre, right? Like it's that old trope. There's a great story about this where basically the guy goes into into an interview, and the boss interviews him, and he says, what motivates you? And the guy, well, I really want to do a good job for blah 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 blah, right? And he says, all right, no, I'm not going to hire you. And another guy comes in and he says, what motivates you? And he says, blah blah blah. And a third guy comes in and he goes, I'm motivated by money. And the boss says, you're hired. Why? Well, because he understands the motivation of the other person. And if you're motivated by, say, making a better product, and you're at the bottom of the assembly line, you don't know what a better product means. You might know what will make that item that you're working on in the moment better, but that item is not the product. It's an instance of a product. And because things like assembly lines are not even close to perfect, right? Then you run into this problem of making things worse for the whole by making them better for the single instance. And it's a confusion of the general for the specific. It's a very well-known bias that's sort of everywhere. And when we do this assumptive thing about, well, everybody can learn everything, or anybody can have anybody else's perspective, which is where that ends, right? It's the implication made by the statement. They always back off on it. They go, well, not anybody, right? But you made a statement that would lead to that only leads to that conclusion. In order for your system to work, where you can embody the perspective of another person, that has to apply universally. Otherwise, your statement is not correct at all, right? It's got all these caveats on it that make it false. And but I think the bigger and better point to some extent is, you can lose these skills, say, to play cards, right? We'll say as the result of losing your ability to connect to your telos, we'll call it. But B, in order to get them back, you're technically, and I have 2 videos on this recently, immature, right? You have slid down the maturity hierarchy, and you need to be stepped back in like a child in order to get back to where you were, right? So you need to learn the rules of the card game slowly all over again. And that, to me, is the real issue. Is people
like
are not
having brain damage.
Give them the gospel or whatever, and they'll be fine. And maybe Billy Graham could get away with it, but I don't think anyone else is going to be able to now, because things have changed quite a bit.
Yeah, and having to rebuild these things from the beginning probably is a long process. I recall, there was in the Nicomachean Ethics, we're all talking about how to reach eudaimonia, having a good spirit that's oriented with the good and communion with the good, and all of that. And Aristotle is like, well, what if you don't have any money and you're not particularly intelligent, and you've got all these disadvantages against acquiring eudaimonia, because he had kind of an elitist view of that, and Aquinas took it and made it a little more accessible by the power of God's grace. And basically what Aristotle said was, well, if you've got a whole bunch of disadvantages, but you've got some good friends, then maybe you've got a shot at it.
Exactly.
Because that's kind of your only way out of there is these people need to lift you up out of the state that you're in, and to work for all of that. And Ron, if I was working for the money, I'd be making bad financial decisions here.
Yeah. No, we don't work for money. I mean, the point of the story was you have to know the motivation, and you have to have a motivation that you can control. In other words, if I'm trying to work with you and I don't know your motivation, you are by definition suspect. If I don't take that seriously, that could be very disastrous, right? If I know your motivation and I can't control it, I can't keep I can't make you a better employee for the mission at hand, even if it's the same mission. In other words, again, if you care about the bottle being constructed and not about the product as a whole, then the decisions you will make, right? And maybe you can't, like maybe that's your capacity. The decisions you will make will not be good for the product. And like people don't understand that because they can't think in generalizations. They can't think, oh, just because one instance of bottle is not good in the assembly line doesn't mean the product is bad. There are, in fact, I've worked in manufacturing plants. I've actually seen this firsthand. There are plenty of instances where they accept a fairly low but catastrophic failure rate because the end product on average is much higher, and it's much higher. Like these are not small differences. Sometimes they are, but generally they're not small differences. And the person who sees the one corrupt product and says, oh my goodness, this is a catastrophe. Now, you don't understand. You'd have 3 lesser corrupted products that you'd have to throw out instead of one badly corrupted product. That actually happens mathematically with certainty on certain types of product lines. Like this is a known phenomena in the industry. So if your method of approaching a goal isn't aligned, you also can't cooperate. So the cooperation's not that straightforward. But see, these conversations aren't even on the radar yet. Like we're still way behind. Joe made some progress, I think, today, although I'm gonna go through his video and throw a few more comments at him. But that's like the most important part, is that the individualism is causing people to try to split themselves apart from the world, which gives them no telos, which causes domicide, right? But then they also lose a bunch of skills of cooperation. And so you can't just feed them a new home in the same way you couldn't feed the starving people of Auschwitz a full meal because you'd kill them, basically. Right? It's the same problem, actually. It's the same pattern.
It's the same thing with evangelization. If you try to feed people quickly, you can push them away.
I mean, that's like something that a small destructive body known as a cult would do, is they kind of love bomb people, right?
Yep.
And
very common.
if you've been starved for that your whole life long, it'll probably have a strange effect on you, which is, there's a little bit of an advantage to the sometimes impersonal nature of a Catholic parish, where you can just kind of sneak in the back, right? You can just kind of sneak in the back, and like some people are going to be much happier if they can just go for a month or two, sneak into the back, sneak out early, and just look and see how this is all running, right?
Yeah.
Like and especially if they've had prior negative experiences with small, highly controlling and destructive religious bodies, that would that give people a little bit of an easier in there. It's not without its disadvantages, because we do have the problem that people can just leave and nobody notices, and that is that's a big problem that we're dealing with. Right, well, we're not dealing with it right now. That's why it continues to be a problem. But yeah, that's something that we're yeah.
I think it's up at my parish. I missed a couple of days, and next thing you know, I go there and people ask, like, "Well, where are you?" And it's a pretty big parish too. So I'm surprised. It's developed over time, though. And like you said, initially it started out when I reverted back to the faith back in November. I was just like kind of putting in, doing my own thing, and scooting out at the end. And now, like last night, I got a friend who's coming to mass with me, sitting behind me. I got nuns and other people who are stopping to talk after mass and whatnot. So it really did build over time.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
If you guys could catch me up, I'm kind of catching what you're talking about, because the reason I jumped on is you were talking about making money, and I'm sorry, because I wasn't. It was.
I mean, that was a brief passageway, but we were more talking about cooperation and cooperation towards a common end, and how that's actually pretty complicated.
Meaning
but
crisis
but
too. You
but
brought up the
uh,
meaning crisis. That's my
yeah.
favorite.
But
Right. Oh,
money is a way that people can cooperate. So
Right.
um,
It's a neutral mode of motivation that allows people to cooperate in situations where they otherwise would not be able to. Right.
yeah.
It's actually fantastically important. And anybody who's worked for volunteer organizations or worked for free or had people working for them for free versus having paid employees will be able to talk at length about the difference. And it is a
Right.
big difference.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's never fun
Totally.
when you got to fire a volunteer.
Oh, that's got to be awful.
Yeah,
Well, yeah.
yeah.
Well, that's a whole other golly. And if you have to fire a volunteer, that means something bad has been happening. So I've
Mhm.
worked at churches. I understand that.
Yeah.
Well, it was funny because I was looking at the comments, and so you're talking about how society works together.
Well, it's on multiple layers, right? So I started off talking about games and how, if you can play games well, then that builds you good skills for living a good life.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
I'm not opposed to the youth sports. I'm just opposed to the sometimes excessive and damaging attention that they get. But that's anything can get out of hand. But we also brought up how if you know somebody's just here for the money, then you've got a very clear
Hmm.
understanding of their motivations, and they're probably just going to do whatever it takes to not get fired and earn their paycheck, which might not be your most
I
dedicated
grew up in a
employee.
time.
It might be a little more compliant.
Right. Uh,
So
yeah.
yeah, just different musings on this. Uh, Different ways of cooperating and what that means.
Okay. I I I'd rather work for a church because I've worked for a few, and they're always a mixed bag of nuts.
Mhm.
I did video editing, and you'll always wind up with problems because there's people, but you run into less crazy on a whole. Usually, if there's a problem, it's like, and it's funny. Like, here's a fight at church. Listen, I'm sorry. I just don't like what you're doing, and they're like, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry, or if they do get frustrated, they're like, ah, gee whiz, or it's the like in the world, they'll be like, oh really? Well, how about you pick a finger right in the middle here, buddy? And you're like, and it's more like, how far does this escalate? Like, and it's two barking dogs. Whereas usually at a good church or in a church setting, I've noticed it's really is. It might be frustrating, but a spirit of cooperation, for the lack of a better word.
Mhm.
Is it?
And
That's because churches are a filter. Like if you're going to church, you're already cooperating,
yeah,
and you'll
okay,
notice
yeah,
right now the talk is, as you had put it, unfortunately, Ryan, that only people only work for the money. Well, if that's your
right.
attitude about cooperation, then you're not going to be good
Uh,
at cooperation now, are you? And you can't
I
do
I
that at
think
a
you're right.
church because churches typically don't pay well, if at all,
Yeah,
and therefore it is a filter for people who cooperate better on average. And
that's
because people
interesting.
don't understand the filtering nature of the world, they're very
Uh,
confused about these things and they misassign them, right? To be easy to say, oh, the assignment is people at church are generally because they have the word or something, right? Or
mm,
because they're being preached to on a regular basis, are more holy and therefore they cooperate better. That's not correct at all. Like that's just
right,
flat out false. But it's easy to
right.
misread that information that way, and people do it all the time.
I think there's
Mm,
also an important difference between somebody who works for the money and somebody who works and they need the money and they wouldn't do it without the money, but it's not really about the money,
Right.
right?
That's what
So
you
yeah,
like
want. ultimately.
like, I do get paid a salary and have my room and board taken care of, and by
Right.
worldly standards, it's not a ton, but it is nice. And if that weren't the arrangement, I'm not and like I had to work a job and bivocational is how they would call that in certain Protestant circles there. Um,
Right.
that would be like, I don't know. I don't know how I'd respond to that. It's impossible to know because it's not how the world works. But it's an interesting thought experiment. Anyway, yeah. So there's a difference between I obviously I'm doing this because it's a
Yeah.
career and I have duties towards myself. First of all, to be a responsible citizen and have a certain degree of self sufficiency, but also maybe you got a family and that sort of thing too. So that's maybe a different way of understanding working for the money.
Mm-hmm.
But
Sure.
there's also what is money for? Well, money's for something else.
Right.
And keeping in mind what the supposed for something else is, you get pretty miserly and pretty greedy when the only motivation is just to watch the number go up, and they don't spend their money on anything useful or entertaining. They just want to see the number go up. I don't know how common that is, but it probably does happen.
Not a lot. I mean, there's always one guy in the group that is a penny pincher, but usually most people I've seen, they'll get something. You know what I mean? I've rarely met someone who worships money, but then again, I'm not rich, so and I'm not trying to hack politicians, but one of my family members was he worked in DC, and he was I think electrical engineer, just a brilliant guy, and he was started to work for the government. And we asked him, his name was Luke. He's like, "Well, what do you think of the government?" He goes, "Democrats and Republicans," and he wasn't being. He's like, all of the politicians, the ones he's like, they just care about money. They just care about them getting money, and I'm like,
Yeah.
all
The
right.
people in DC now, that's certainly the case. Right.
That's
Yeah.
another
This is
filter
the
right there.
teachers.
Washington D.C.
Yeah.
But those two things have something in common. And that thing is they somehow convinced everybody that those two professions were underpaid, bureaucrats and teachers, and increased the amount of money going into the system. And then lo and behold, a bunch of greedy people got in there, and now it's full of greedy people. Oh, really? Thanks, genius. But you did that. You did that. Like, I've told people this over and over again. You want your teachers to have a salary so low they wouldn't do it for the money. That's what you want. Like, I don't even understand, because people don't understand filters. No, you want somebody with the means to do it not for the money, and with the motivation to do it that isn't money. That's what I don't want people teaching my children because they're making money. Like, no, that's terrible. What an awful idea. Like, teachers are underpaid. No, teachers are not underpaid. That's not a possible condition. And it's weird too, because it's all online, all over the place now. People will give you free courses and free training and free teaching and all kinds of things, and very extensive free stuff. Free stuff is everywhere with the internet because distribution costs are so low. The barrier to entry is so low. And so it's very obvious from the data available that can't be true. Can't be. It's completely wrong. Just observe the world. And that's what is so interesting, right? Is that if you value things only in money, you're just going to misunderstand the world. This is why Nassim Taleb, read all his books, talks about, he says he's kind of backed up on that. All economists are frauds. Yeah, they are. Because economics is the worst possible way to understand the world. It's worse than politics because it's richer than the political frame, but it's so completely and utterly wrong about everything that it's like, what are you doing?
Yeah.
And it takes 10 seconds to prove it that it's wrong. You just look at the world and go, yeah, that didn't work. This is completely wrong.
Yeah, I think I look at the sort of people that I've worked with in a church environment, and yeah, I don't have quite as much experience with education, but I got the church environment, and it's also a low-paying job, and you know, you do like you kind of your typical profile for a church employee is usually a woman, right? Usually a married woman whose husband makes enough money to really support them, so they don't really need this job,
Right.
although they might not do it for free, and that's fine.
Right.
And very often, their children are no longer require their constant attention, so
Yep.
that they could be free to this. And so you actually end up with some very reliable employees because
Mhm.
they've gone through the how shall I say it, the intensive training of motherhood,
Yeah. Yep.
which I've heard very reliably. If you do it well, it will cure you of an awful lot of selfishness.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
True.
and so they've been cured of all of that, and now they've got this virtue that they've built up through a service to their families, and they can put it at service to the church a little bit there. And the nice thing about the Catholic system is the HR. I'm convinced of this, that most of your HR costs at a big corporation, and like all of the dispute management and that sort of thing, like 90% of that has got to be men making unwanted advances at women, right? It's just, and it's inevitable, right? And
Yep.
like maybe there's certain things you put up with at a bar or at the county fair that it's going to make a work environment like, but the nice thing is that if you're Catholic, it's like we've got very clear rules on how this works. So if I make any advances on any women, it's like that's an immediate no-no. So they're
Yeah.
automatically unwanted. So you know how to judge it already. Like
Yeah.
judging these things becomes very easy.
You
Father
don't need
Scheitzer
a
shouldn't have done
mediator.
that.
Yeah.
You don't need a mediator.
The rules obviate the need for mediation. Right.
Yep. There's
Very
there,
handy. Rules
there's
are
just a
great.
judge on top who's gonna give me a little boot, for my bad behavior.
Yep. Not a little one.
Well, that's possible. Yeah.
Yeah.
And you're off
But
the island.
anyway,
Have a good day.
the rules, the rules of engagement are very clear. It's like, you don't do that here. Like
Right.
you got to be married for that. So anyway, it's at least, and you do have, the possibility of somebody who's willing to not work for money because they're crazy, and they want to propagate that. So you got to look out for that when you're hiring. But that is, I think it's been my experience at the 3 institutions in the church that I've worked for. So.
With that in mind, I don't make a lot of money. I've been around rich people. I mean, really well off. And I'll be honest, a lot of them, and this is in the Midwest, a lot of them were just down to earth, good folks that just earned their money. They usually were smart, hardworking, and just applied themselves. It was just early to bed, go to work, 9 to 5 it or more, and then save and don't spend foolishly and give it time.
Yeah, and I remember hearing the reflections of a more experienced priest, and he had time in a very rich parish in the suburbs of the Twin Cities, one of those kinds of towns, and he actually noted a difference between the businessmen and the professionals. That the businessmen were, on average, more generous with their time and with their money than the professionals were.
Yep.
And he attributed that to the businessmen have a better sense of like the ups and the downs and the responsibility towards their employees, and they kind of respond from a place of gratitude. Which, maybe if you're a doctor working for a big system, you want to do your job well, but you don't have the sense of a broader commitment to that, and it's very stable. You are not responsible for the stability of your system. Your whole medical care system. Um,
Yeah.
but maybe it's also because the businessmen have a lot less student loan debt. I don't know.
Well, there's a number of factors. I mean, businessmen understand and appreciate hard work in others, and they are the type of people, like, if you're a businessman, you're a cooperator because you have to cooperate to have a business, right? Any kind of business. Like the buddy I was just visiting, he is the least cooperative business person I've ever met, and as a result, yeah, he suffers. Like, he's the kind of guy that spends 4 months a year doing his own taxes so that he pays the absolute least possible. And I'm like, or you could be on your boat for 3.5 more months of the year and pay 10% more. And it's not that, we're not talking about a huge amount. Like 10% is not going to kill you, right? In fact, you'd make it all back in your time alone if you did the math. But the filter for businessmen is they appreciate hard work and they want to reward other people's hard work. Whereas professionals aren't going to volunteer as much, whether they have the money or not, because they don't have a framework for doing that. And they're not appreciative of hard work. They associate hard work with how much money they have. And that's the biggest single filter difference. But people in the Midwest who are drastically different. And the problem is in the US, unlike all of Europe, or basically all of every other country that's not us, people here earn their money with very few exceptions. We have fewer inheritors of wealth. The highest income mobility in the world has been the U.S. for decades and decades and decades. Taleb talks about this, right? More people, like most people are going to spend some time in the top 10% of wealth in the United States. None of that is true in Europe. In Europe, there's families that have had almost all the wealth in the country for 600 plus years. Multiple families, granted, but like all the wealth in those countries has been in the same families for hundreds of years in some cases. And so it's a very, very different experience. And yet we talk about it like it's one world with one experience and one perspective, but we don't have that. The perspective of somebody who's worked for a software company versus somebody who hasn't is very, very different, right? If you've worked in manufacturing, which I have, then you understand certain manufacturing principles that are not obvious, and that the video game mentality people would screech and say are false. And I only know that because I've had arguments with them on the internet for decades. None of them ever worked anywhere either, though, so they don't know how any business works, much less a factory. And that's the problem when you assume that you can take a perspective that you don't have any experience with. You're almost certainly going to be wrong. And that's one of the problems, is people have no appreciation for that. They think you can open a book or read a white paper and understand something well enough to start commenting on it as though you know it. And that's just false. Like, it's just incorrect. And when you do that, you're withdrawing from the world. And the next thing you know, you won't remember how to play cards with your family. Like, that's how that happens. That degradation of being in the world every day and learning to cooperate better and better and better. When you don't have that, you lose the skill of cooperation altogether, and you embitter yourself and become resentful. That's a phenomena that occurs. Do we need to? Are you getting arrested, Father, or what's going on?
No, it's probably somebody else. It's a fire truck. We're fine.
As long as the church isn't burning down, we're fine. Yeah.
Well, I can't see the church from here. It's on the other side of the wall. Yeah.
Yeah, that degradation, which is causing, to some extent, or contributing to the meaning crisis, that's really important. And the we'll call it the grand narrative, or the telos that we've lost, which is the same thing, by the way, postmodernism for the evil. That's due to the recession of the church, in my opinion. Like, that's where it comes from, and you can't just easily replace that, right? And so that's where to me, that's where we're lacking the most. That's where the real sort of rubber meets the road, if you will.
Yeah. I'm afraid things are probably gonna keep on getting worse to get better. before they get better. So that's yeah. I don't think we found the bottom yet. I know that there have been some helpful trends recently, but they're going to need to amplify considerably and get a lot stronger before we start seeing some real change throughout the world there. But you know what? We can sit around and worry about the entire world, or we can just attend the little plot that the Lord has given us, and if we just attend the little plot that the Lord has given us, um, that might be enough.
Well, and help your neighbors, but you have to understand, as Dr. Vervaeke has sort of come to, you need good problem formulation. Well, right? Because then you can actually come up with solutions, with ways of interfacing people and stepping them into the area where they can reconnect with a telos, like any kind of telos. I mean, I know Hales Eldon tweeted out, I think it was today actually, about we have all these all these issues, right? And they're all sort of related to this one thing, and I'm like, yeah, and we've been talking about this. Welcome to the party. A lot of people are sort of catching up to sort of the stuff that Peterson was talking about and Vervaeke's been talking about 5 years later, basically, or 6 or 7 years later. And that's why I'm going through 12 Rules for Life, which 4 hours yesterday. And so that was 4.5 hours of reading and subsequent, because I had no time in between 4 hours of recording or live streaming it. That was a bear. But it's interesting to read 12 Rules for Life now and see the gaps and the holes and the spots where Peterson's still an individualist, materialist, objectivist.
Even though he's dancing at the edge of it.
Yeah. Well, and to appreciate, because you should appreciate what he did, because what he did is, I mean, he's still the number one. Like, all these Christian apologists are like, we know this game, we can do it better, and all of them combined can't do it better. And they haven't figured that out after 6 or 7 years, that's the disturbing part. Like, when you're doing something for 6 or 7 years, you should figure out you're not good at it, that nothing will deter them. Don't worry. But he knows how to step people out of that framing, right? Maybe by accident even. I don't know how deliberate it is. I suspect most of it's by accident. So that to me is the we'll say the good part.
Well, if he's trying to help, then it isn't really an accident.
It's not entirely accidental. No, I mean, you have a big rise like that where you're very popular, and yeah,
see.
Yeah, but there's a lot of good tidbits in 12 Rules for Life. It's just that the way they're framed is just like, it's a train wreck. It's an absolute train wreck. It's sort of shocking how bad some of his framing is.
I mean, I've always liked his lectures better than his writing.
These lectures are way better.
The nice thing about the writing is that it's going to be well organized in theory, and you're going to be able to find things a little bit more quickly than searching through lectures. Maybe our AI tools will get to the point where that's no longer the case.
Oh no, the AI is fantastic. I have all of Maps of Meaning, all 3 lecture series in one of the AIs. And I was like curious because Sally Joe and I did this on Navigating Patterns, obviously did this talk. We're going to do another one on dragons and unicorns. And I was like, tell me what Dr. Peterson's, thoughts on unicorns are. And it only uses the sources you put in, Notebook LM from Google. It's fantastic. It just spit it right out with all the references. So you could go back and look at the timestamps and the videos.
Good. These daggone tools might be good for something every once in a while.
They are very good for certain things. If you go on the Mark of Wisdom Discord server, you can go to Project Help and go to the URL for the game testing for the game that we developed, which also got developed with AI, but also I had it implement because we need to go through the game mechanics. I did implement an electronic version, which I'll probably never offer anybody because I think that's horrible. But that game, and it came out way better than I expected, partly with the help of AI. I mean, I did the work, but AI did a bunch of the, the organizational stuff. That is supposed to step you into cooperation with very simple rules over time. And I think it came out way better than I thought it would. So yeah, so you can see some of the power of the AI. And then of course my animations, I use some AI in my animations occasionally. The next animation I'm doing will be almost entirely AI because it's very hard to get good animators to work for free. But of course the AI is screwing up all day. So I've made very little progress today. I'm not too happy with that. The good news is I can just tell it something and then it takes 20 minutes anyway. It's like go do other things.
You're running that locally, that you maybe don't have the power of the cloud behind it. But
no, that's all cloud. It's all cloud. The problem is the AIs are very, very bad at spatial relationships, and they're not good at math, which is just cracks me up every time. And so when you try to tell it something like build me a pyramid and put a bunch of people on it, it can't handle that, and it screws it up in the most amusing ways. So at least you're amused by the mistakes it's making,
and all the electricity that you've blasted down the drain or out the exhaust pipe.
Well, maybe, but electricity here is cheap, so I don't care.
Okay. Mr. Sites.
Ooh.
Mr. Sites.
I mean,
my father's not here.
Yeah, really.
Yeah. Anyway, he'd be Reverend Mr. Sites anyway, because he's a deacon. Yeah.
I assume you're familiar with the rules of baseball, such as
Yeah. I mean,
there's
a few of the more obscure ones that I might not be fully familiar with, like the infield fly ball rule. I'm aware that it's a thing. I don't know if I'd know them well enough to be an umpire.
Right.
But I think I'd know them well enough to play and be I'm still going to be rather clumsy and slow, like I've always been. My stuff in my opening rant about not being the top on the team was not strictly theoretical knowledge for me. Explain how batting average is expressed. You know what? No, it's my podcast. You can't tell me what to do. So
yeah, for science, go look it up. That's a Google question.
Yeah.
What's wrong with everybody?
Yeah. Anyway, the stats are for nerds,
The stats are for nerds. And Moneyball kind of proved they were doing stats wrong all along anyway. So, which Moneyball is the best representation of relevance realization that you could get, that's easily accessible to people, right? He just, same stats, same sets of numbers, just kind of paid attention to the, to the same stats in a different way and prioritized them differently, relevance realization. And that's it.
Now, Mark, you made Mr. Yawn sad.
Oh, excellent. Well, that's good news. I'm glad to hear that. Maybe he'll start rolling all the time and grow up, but I don't have much hope for that. But I'm gonna pray for it anyway. So.
My! I'm glad to see that you're attempting prayer. It's good for you.
I don't kick him off, and other lesser minds certainly would, and I'm always tempted to too. It's
man,
worse than Benjamin Franklin. I mean, at least he's half clueless. Yanni knows exactly what he's doing. Those are the people those are the ones that test your patience for sure.
Oh, it's a good thing there's no people like that in the church.
At least it's not a human universal.
Have you upgraded your lighting recently?
I have. Oh yeah, I changed the lighting around quite a bit.
Yeah, it looks good. And
Thank you.
the pirate chic is if you can manage though, if you could iron the flag, get the creases out of it, I think that'd be a good thing. But it looks like it's polyester, so make sure you do it on low heat.
Yeah. We're working on that. We came back from basically Pirate Island. I mean, Ocracoke Island claims to be Blackbeard's headquarters. So I don't know. So I have 2 pirate mugs. I actually have a pirate T-shirt now, which it was, you should wear your pirate T-shirt. I'm like, nah, right. And I got that wonderful little. That's actually a glass. It's little pieces of glass that make up the pirate on the door. So yeah, it's interesting that they have all that beautiful pirate stuff, and we just talk about lucky, right? So my buddy, I just went to visit him basically for like 3 days. It's a 5.5 hour freaking drive up there. Talk about the middle of nowhere. It's an hour to the nearest place with stuff, as in there's 3 restaurants within 45 minutes. Right. So you've got to drive at least an hour to get to like a chain restaurant or something, through nothingness. So he had a house. It was empty because he rents out houses, some properties, and he let us stay there for free. And then we said, well, yeah, we're going to go over to Ocracoke Island on the ferry, which is right up the street. And he said, well, I'll gas up the golf cart for you and you can take it for the day. We had a golf cart full of gas, and which wasn't, I wouldn't say it was ideal. Because we wanted to go to the beach. You can't actually get to the beach on a golf cart, but you can walk 1.5 miles and get to one of the greatest beaches of all time on Ocracoke Island from a golf cart. So you take the golf cart, you walk 1.5 miles, you walk 1.5 miles back. It wasn't bad. We'd spend a couple hours out. We got in the water, got these huge 4-foot waves, 5-foot waves, right at high tide, which was kind of cool. And yeah, and then we went to a different beach the next day. So we were at 3 different beaches in 3 different days. And we went out into the Atlantic, which was very nice. But yeah, we came back with all kinds of pirate booty, like actual pirate booty from Pirate Island. It was kind of cool. And I got to witness, well, what are they calling it this week? Mass formation, where the people running the ferry were completely clueless about how the ferry was 5.5 years ago, 6 years ago, as opposed to how it is now. They were like, "Oh no, no, the ferry schedule hasn't changed." I'm like, "Bro, you're running 4 ferries instead of 6 or 8. Used to run 8 in the summer, some summers. Now you're running 4 in the summer. Do you not know this?" He'd worked there, the whole time. It's total blank slate. And this is why I say, like, some people can't take different perspectives. Some people can't remember what they were doing 6 years ago in their job, because his job doesn't change, right? Like, ferry comes in at 8, or the last ferry comes in at 4:30, which is what we're talking about here, by the way. The last ferry off Ocracoke is 4:30 instead of 8 or 6:30, right? He didn't even remember, doesn't even recall. And I'm like, oh, I mean, good for him. Like, no shade on the guy. Like, we need those people. Someone's got to run the damn ferry. I got to get on the damn thing to get back. So I'm glad he's there, but also like expecting him to be able to do, like, can you summarize Aristotle for me? This isn't going to happen, guys. This isn't a solution for these people. We need a better solution for them. One that's easier for them and easier on us. Like, individually explaining that Plato's Cave has nothing to do with you breaking free from some tyrannical system, and like, explaining that to each person that I need to explain, that would take more than my lifetime.
Yeah. So how to get the Matrix out of people, huh?
And that's oh my god, I've seen like 3 or 4 Matrix videos now, and I actually watched one's like 2 hours and 40 minutes on just the two subsequent movies, and like I got like 25 minutes in, and I was like, I don't know why we can't eliminate these people from the gene pool, but my goodness, like the stuff they're telling people is so bad. It just shouldn't be allowed, flat out. I mean, they're just like, they're doing like the number of people now that are doing the trick where they say, well, you might say that I'm making a claim without evidence, but, and then they never actually give you a scintilla of evidence. I'm like, really? Really? This works. And this works on most people, like, including you. Like, it just works on everybody. They hear, oh, no, he's aware that that he made a claim without evidence. Therefore, it's all fixed now. No, it's not. I want the evidence. And of course, what he was saying was complete BS. It's total nonsense. I was like, that's not what you're saying is so false. It's a crime how false it is.
Mm-hmm.
It's an actual punishable crime, possibly by death. Like, I mean, this is bad.
Mm-hmm.
And just the amount of that stuff that goes on, particularly on YouTube, is just utterly shocking. Utterly shocking.
It's a great platform for sophistry, right? And obviously,
it is. It's
right,
the best platform for sophistry.
The not this podcast, obviously, and certainly not navigating patterns.
Certainly not.
I would not dare to suggest such a thing. This is the true love of wisdom here, and all of that.
Sophia, indeed.
But the sophists were accused of sounding good and saying nothing, and you can do that on YouTube, and it works just fine. I've actually encountered a few videos that I was pretty certain where the entire script was written by an AI.
Oh, there's a lot of that.
Yeah.
Well, the sophists also said very ordinary, obvious things, using lots of extremely long, multisyllabic words. They were famous for that as well.
Yes. Yeah. So, and another, I actually had a bit of a intense, it accidentally got very intense at the gym when I was talking to a guy who I know was another Christian. And he was asking me about my opinions on Harry Potter, and I didn't give him like the kind of standard, it's got magic in it, so therefore nobody should read it. But at that moment, I realized that if you don't have a good, solid foundation for your life, and because I read them a lot when I was a kid, and I think I turned out okay. But that's because I had like the real thing, at Sundays.
Right.
And so some of the more fantastical elements didn't have an opportunity to capture my imagination. And so it's like, I actually think, there might be some danger in reading it, but about as much as you have in watching this Star Trek or The Matrix as well.
Right. Well, The Matrix is worse, I would say.
Yeah, that might be the most potent of them all. But
Matrix is by far the most potent, because you can make the argument that Harry Potter is pretty powerful, we'll say, on balance, especially because it has not all, but many of the flat conceptions of the perfect story, we'll call it, from the Gospels, right? The resurrection and all that stuff is certainly in Harry Potter, but The Matrix is so sneaky because it talks about simulation and simulacra specifically, and then it proceeds from there, and the lies it tells in the middle that are very hard to spot. Like for example, I use this all the time, and I reached out to Jesse because I'm like, bro, like, we have to do this Matrix video because everyone else is doing terrible ones. Nobody gets out of the Matrix in the Matrix trilogy ever. Like, I don't know what to tell you about what the movie said, but if you thought you did, you did not see the movie. The machines control the real world too, guys. Like, the AI is in total control at all times. And that never changes in the Matrix. And it never changes in the trilogies. And it never changes even in that reprehensible fourth catastrophe that was just done to just middle finger the studio, as they say in the beginning of the movie. By the way, which how people are getting away with YouTube saying, so the fourth Matrix movie was an FU to the studio. I'm like, they said that in the opening of the movie. Like actually in those, almost in those terms. Like it doesn't seem like a revelation somehow, but sure. Also
Yeah.
correct, like sophistry.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
We have a new person, Father. What's up with that?
Yeah, David. Sometimes you got to elbow your way into these conversations, David, if you want in. But if you're content just hanging out, I'm not going to extract any wisdom from you. I'm not a dentist, so
Well, I'm just here to say hi and pop in a little bit, and I love the Matrix. So I'm just listening here, trying to follow the conversation. So
yeah.
I'm a kid of the '90s, so the Matrix was like our Star Wars awakening. Where you're like, this is what movies could be. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
By far. Yeah, it's got that same element. And I don't, oddly, there's one piece of computer history I'm unsure of. But allegedly the RAID storage that everybody uses, the redundant disk array storage, was done for Star Wars, like for an Industrial Light and Magic. Well, in the same way, a lot of people may not know this, or hopefully they do by now. The movie's been out for a while. The Matrix, that scene where he's unplugged and he falls down that, it's a 7.5 second scene. Like that's all the money went into that one scene, because it's the seminal scene in the movie where he's unplugged. And so but it's weird, right? Because you don't really have to, it's 7.5 seconds or something stupid. It's a very short scene. So you don't really have to do a good job with it, because it's 7.5 seconds. Who's gonna, you know what I mean? It doesn't have to be that good. And they put in a ridiculous amount of time, energy, and effort into that one scene. But I think that's because they want that part of it to be the most true, which is, again, a recapitulation of a misreading and total rejection of what Plato wrote when he wrote the so-called allegory of the cave. See my video on navigating patterns. It doesn't happen. Didn't happen. Not going to happen. But yeah, it's the spectacle of it is equal to, right? Because they invented bullet time, right? That
Yep.
whole thing. Like there's a lot of it, just like Star Wars. There's a lot of parallels there for sure for the generation. The introduction of simulation and simulacra, the book and that concept, and there's so much stuff in there, and I still love the movie. It's probably the worst and most evil movie that's ever been created, and I still love it. So there you go.
Well, I have refused to watch the fourth movie.
Beyond horrible.
I don't even know. I haven't heard anything good about it. The third movie was already hard enough to watch.
The whole trilogy.
I love the whole trilogy. I don't think you can just watch just one. The way I like to categorize it is, the first movie has all the philosophy in the world, right? But at a very surface level. And then the subsequent movies, less philosophy, but deeper, right? And if you could go back and edit out all the things they thought were cool that made the movie good, that absolutely didn't make the movie good, like fight scenes and special effects, you'd have much better trilogy movies. But you don't, because they, but this is a classic case. It's something critical drinker sort of falls into every month or two, and then they fall out of the whole group of them when they're thinking about what's wrong with movies. They kind of come to the conclusion that, oh yeah, this is just done by dumb people who don't know what makes good movies, and then they reduce. Well, if you like The Matrix, it's because of the special effects, and it's because of the fight scenes. That's what makes it a good movie. And it's like, well, no, good movies are made by writing. Like, that's it. That's the whole key, right? And this, like, this is easy to determine scientifically, because there are movies that are terribly shot in black and white that are excellent. Like, it's not that hard, right? So therefore, it can't be any of those things. They're now, if you were actually applying the scientific method correctly, that theory is wrong, and now you need a new theory. It can't be the special effects. It can't be. It's not that those things don't help, right? But at some point you're just stacking enchantment. And I talked about that actually on my last Pirate live stream on Navigating Patterns on Friday. right? The stacked enchantment. I'll do a recorded video on that. I just hate doing it because I can totally run out of enchantment when needed. I just, one should not wield such power lightly, even on YouTube, even with warnings. It's you can do a lot. Let me tell you, you can really suck people in if you know what you're doing.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Bruce,
Yeah.
we brought up
Hey.
Meaning Crisis. I'm so happy. It's my favorite
Yeah.
day. Meaning Crisis and stepping people in and loss of skills. Father Eric did that all by himself. I had nothing to do with it. From a
Excellent.
single card game, no less. Well, not my single card. Virtually.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, if you just got your eyes open, every once in a while something gets dropped on your lap. So it pays to pay attention to what's going on around you.
Well, you'll see the convergence. The convergence is happening everywhere. Like the number of words that Critical Drinker uses that we were using 5 years ago, right? Number of words that Jonathan Peugeot. Oh, Peterson. Geez, what was this video today? Navigating education and something else. And I'm like, oh, navigating. Huh, Jordan? Where'd you get that word from? That's a really good word.
He's definitely been watching your channel, Mark. You know, that's the only possible explanation.
Yeah, he has seen me on a video on Paul's channel, but which I know for a fact. But no, I mean it's the convergence. It's not that he's watching my stuff. It is, but everyone's going to converge on the language eventually because we.
Would you say that everything that rises must converge?
Well, I don't know about that. I think in this case, it's everything that falls must converge because everyone's falling still, I think. Don't tell Bruce. Bruce will be very upset if he finds out we live in a fallen world. I don't think
Flannery
he can handle
Oh, yeah, I can't handle that. I can't handle it.
Here, I'll find it.
Is that part of our reading whenever we're doing?
Yeah. Whenever your other book club gets done.
I got 2 more weeks, Father. I apologize.
She's the one who says it. Everything that rises must converge.
That's our next story, huh?
No, that's not our next story. But
okay.
We'll get to it. That's also
Okay.
That's also the title of one of her collections of short stories.
Yeah.
Oh no,
I mean,
I
it's
just
hard to.
have the complete
This
work.
is this a secular work?
So Flannery O'Connor's definitely Catholic.
Oh, right. Yeah.
Like,
Okay.
isn't afraid of being Catholic, and she sets everything in the South and does a lot of religious themes. But
It's
it's
really
not. It's not like a VeggieTales thing.
Right. Fair enough. I mean, I guess I could see that like union with Christ. So that's true. Like if you were to say that, right? Everything that rises must converge. So that's true.
She's playing a lot of word games, like a
Yeah.
real lot of word games in her stories. It's really, and she's quite a good writer, I would say. If you want to read really good short stories, I'm slowly coming around. I mean, they're jarring. Some of them are quite jarring, and probably shouldn't be sprung on people the way certain people sprung them on me. But forgiveness is the sort of motto in the Catholic sphere, I guess. So I can't be too angry at Father for too long. But I'm not over it yet. That's for sure.
Yeah. You came in quite hot on your heel. Quite hot when you first read A Good Man Is Hard to Find.
Hard to find. That would that should come with a warning label, Father. Come on. That was a bit of a trick.
You should have just asked somebody. Don could have told you that Flannery O'Connor's horrifying.
Why would I suspect that a kindly priest who has partaken of my hospitality would do such a terrible thing?
Because we
I
read
got
Moby Dick.
sunburned on the beach in Florida with you, sir, and you did that to me. After that, I
We'll be
was
fine.
got us
Quit being
aloe
such a big
lotion and everything.
Quit being a baby. Oh,
Yeah,
man.
it is. They are good stories, but they're not, we'll say, overtly religious. We'll say, at least so far, they haven't been.
Not for the South, anyway.
Well, I think too, like, again, that's the path, is stepping people into these things instead of jumping them too far too fast, as we talked about with the card game. Like, if you don't remember how to play a cooperative card game, because you've lost the skill, effectively, it's not just not remembering the rules, because you just need a rules refresher. That's totally different. Then you've lost some skills, and you need to rebuild those skills over time, just like going to the gym and rebuilding your muscles.
Card game, I think, is a good way to step into it, though, because it's pretty non-threatening and like, oh yeah, he's new, he hasn't played this, so you're gonna go easy on him, do a couple practice rounds. It's not too like childish, like you said. It's a slide back in the in development. Maybe that's correct, but like, we got to give people a little bit of space to save face. That he's just learning how to play a card game right now.
I agree, Father, which is why the game that we're working on, the wisdom game that we're working on, is in fact a card-based game. It's a cooperative card-based game.
It's also probably a good analogy as to why you wouldn't invite newbies to, let's say, expensive card games, right? Where there might be money on the line. And those that do such things are evil people, right? They're just trying to swindle money out of an unsuspecting ignorant person.
And
right?
like, is there really anything, any good that's gained by going over like a $20 buy-in on penny poker?
Not really, no. I mean, it's all relative, I suppose. If you're
fabulously wealthy, sure, maybe you want to put $1,000 down on the table.
No, I think there's a lot of good in it, Father, because for some odd reason, and I'm not claiming to be a great card player, I have never lost a round of cards where there's money on the line for whatever reason. And so I think there's a lot of good in it.
I do agree. In some sense, it's a mental combat sport with risk. So whenever there's risk involved, you have the opportunity to grow and learn.
Well, that's what you need to interface with, Bruce. I mean, this is why Taleb's so handy, because he kind of explains to you, no, human behavior is based on risk calculations, whether you realize it or not. This is why game theory is wrong, or this is what is wrong about game theory, is that humans are very good at unconsciously assessing certain types of risk. And not every human can assess every type of risk. But I like this concept, Father, so I'm probably absolutely going to steal it, that there's a difference between sort of refreshing the rules of the card game and learning the card game rules from scratch. And that's the same difference as the difference between the crisis of faith and a meaning crisis. Because I think that's exactly where we're at. And if you don't play cards for long enough, the crisis of faith looks like the meaning crisis, because you have to start that far down with that many skills and take that many more tiny steps to get them back to where they were. And I think that's what's taken the so-called apologists by surprise, is that they're just not equipped to have second grader conversations with people. They're used to fourth grader conversations with people, and we have kindergartners that need help, and they're just not equipped to do it. But Peterson is, right? Because he's talking to them where they're at, the thing they've learned the most, because what they didn't learn is, we'll say, the religious component. The thing they've learned the most are the secular components. Well, Peterson's pretty excellent at talking secular, a little too good, actually, as evidenced by 4 freaking hours on part 4 of 12 Rules for Life. Man, I'm told reliably by my sources that the other 2 will not be 4 hours. Thank goodness. Just that 1 4-hour session.
This is rules 6 and 7, then.
Yeah, that sounds right. Yeah, and the problem is he does a lot more rambling on those rules. Even though I didn't think that was possible after.
Oh yeah. Set
That's
your house in
possible with
perfect order
Peterson.
before you criticize the world, and pursue what is meaningful, not what is expedient.
Yeah, he doesn't define meaningful. He does a terrible job. It's all individualism and materialism. But he manages to bring some excellent, pointers And nonetheless, and that's sort of what I try to stress. But also, I'm also not going to let anything slip by in terms of Peterson, because the goal of this is more towards what Pastor Paul Vanderklay was talking about, 6, 7 years ago now, where someone's got to pick up people where Peterson leaves them off, and it's like, yeah, well, I guess no one else is doing it, so now's the time to revivify 12 Rules for Life and do the work. So that's really what the book club's about. And for some reason, this 4-hour one has more views than all the others so far, and it's only just out.
Some people are just gluttons for punishment.
I guess. I don't know why you want to do 4 hours on those 2 chapters, but
yeah. But you also have an entire crew of people that have gotten a bit older.
Yeah.
So now there's exposure that they haven't had before. So these sorts of things, they're probably seeking.
You're ready to return to good Peterson, as they categorize. I would argue that Peterson's still good, but yeah. I do take, like, I've always, this is why I supported Pastor Paul for so long, and continue to some extent to support some of his work. Like, I take that very seriously. I think his critique is correct. Peterson takes people to a certain place and leaves them off, and someone needs to pick that up, and no one's doing it correctly, despite getting really good advice on which direction to go in. And so it just so happened that the zeitgeist sort of came back to it, a bunch of people all at the same time, and I decided now's the time to go ahead and do that.
Can I ask, what's the fascination with Peterson?
Well, frankly, this podcast wouldn't happen without him. I would have never met Mark or Bruce. I never would have. Yeah, there's all sorts of. So that's not the end of it, but that's an interesting thing to note, is the number of people who found each other via Peterson.
Yeah, there's that aspect there.
It's a wave.
No. Well, he's just a popular psychologist. Very controversial.
No, he's not.
As I understand.
That's the thing. Like, he's light years more popular than anyone else that's come along.
Let me finish, if I may. As I see it, again, stand to be corrected. Any psychologist is temporal, and the problem I'm having with him, as a good Catholic, is the fact that he doesn't want to touch with a 10-foot pole anything to do with the. How will I put it? Spiritual.
Yeah.
So the biggest frauds is Marx, followed by Freud, and all the other hangers on, which tells you about materialism, this materialistic world, and get you 12 rules of whatever, make your bed, and all that bullshit. As I see. You're putting, just let me finish, putting the man at the center of everything. It's you. It is I. I'm the best. I'm the smartest. I'm the quickest. And I'm this.
Despite all of those problems,
I don't buy that.
Jim, how many psychologists traveled to Australia multiple times and gave talks that anybody attended? How many?
No, I'm generalizing.
In the past 50 years, how many?
So what are you trying to prove?
One.
So what are you trying to say? Well,
he's not just some psychologist.
So what you say? What's the point? So one psychologist, 0 or 10 traveled to Australia. What is your point?
But the point is, it's a big phenomenon that helped a lot of people, and it tells
you something
about where people are.
Well, people are lost. They've got no transcendental. That's my view.
Yeah, but
they got no God in their clothes. Can I say something?
Trying to for decades, and it
can I say
worked.
something? Can I say something? And if you cannot make a nexus with God, with the transcendental, you are searching, and you will ever be lost and search for excuses and things. That's my interpretation. I'm not saying I'm right. I'm speaking subjectively.
I don't disagree, Jim, but that doesn't change the
fact.
I
put. Just hold on 5 seconds. Okay.
Bruce, what's Peterson to you, Bruce? Like, how do you see him?
Peterson is a Peterson is a man who has bumped up against the limits of psychology. Extraordinarily influential in the past 20 years with regard to metaphysics and self-help. I think he's better than Tony Robbins because he actually gives people tangible position. But I don't think that he's a spiritual father. Nor do I think Tolkien or Lewis is either.
Right. See,
so
I
the
figured
story-
you'd go there.
Yeah,
Right.
the story
apologists
arc.
are trying to transition into Tolkien and Lewis as a bridge into the spiritual from
That's right.
Peterson, and that ain't going to work at all. For the same reason that Father Eric's card game scenario works out, which is to say, they ain't got the skills. Some of them never had the skills, a large number of them, right?
Yeah.
And some of them had the skills, and the skills have atrophied over time. Okay?
Yeah.
That's like, there's very little question of that now. I can just show you evidence for that for days. And so the problem is apologists can't reach those people ever. And they're not going to do it with Lewis and Tolkien. They might reach some of the crisis of faith people, and good for them. And maybe that's their job, and maybe they should do that. I don't care, because I don't care about those people, because those people have nothing to do with where I see the biggest problem or where I see I can help, right? Or our methods can help. And so I'm not interested in that. Like, as far as I'm concerned, that's you Christian apologists can do that work if you want to do that work, and maybe that's the work you should do. Don't care. There's other work that you're not going to reach right with your methods. That's the group, the unserved group, that I think is important. And that's also the group to some extent that Paul Vanderklay at least partially identified.
Yeah,
And
there
that
used to
actually
be.
is what's interesting to me, is that there
Sure.
is a group there that will say was helped by Peterson, right?
Yeah.
Which is what made him a big enough phenomena to even go to some place like Australia, right? At all, much less multiple times.
Sure.
But they also need tools to bridge the gap that Jim has correctly identified, that we don't disagree on at all. But to throw away the good work that Peterson's done, including, Father Eric and I wouldn't have met. I wouldn't have met Paul Vanderklay. I wouldn't have met Bruce, right? Like, there's so many people I wouldn't have met, right? Because the Peterson sphere of influence, which is why we have petersonsphere.com, is real. It's a tangible thing, and its locus of attention and its locus of action is Jordan Peterson and the concepts that he brought into popularity.
And it might be useful to point out my relationship to Dr. Peterson. I think he's got some interesting ideas, and a few of his tools I think are helpful and can be put at the use of the gospel. But when I'm dealing with somebody who's already in church, who's already decently well catechized, or even in the process of being catechized, but is very open and is growing and flourishing and participating already, I don't give them Peterson, right? Like, we have all the tools that we need in the Catholic Church already. Where if the person is participating and open to it, like, they don't need Dr. Peterson. So my influence was primarily, I like a new idea every once in a while, or an old idea that I haven't heard. So I did find his, especially Maps of Meaning, Personality and its Development lectures, very useful. His explanation of the Big Five model has been useful in my ministry, right? Because I'm like, oh, this is a very agreeable person. Like, I can, if I got can do that kind of quick mapping there, I might be able to help them a little more quickly. But yeah, it's certainly no replacement for the church and the gospel and all of that.
But it's never. I mean, they never
That's
were.
what-
I mean,
yeah.
they never even. We could go as far back as. Well, I'll just use an easy example. Because Peterson deals with materialism. Quite honestly, let's use Galileo for that instance, or we'll use Aristotle. The work that Aquinas did was not possible without Aristotle. And so, doctor of the church, Aquinas, but the philosophical tools were a language useful in apologetics with the Muslims.
Mhm.
They weren't meaning crisis people. They were Aristotelian Easterners. And so what did Aquinas do with that information? And so you could throw out the baby with the bathwater. That's fine. But I would say, use the basic statement is the Lord can strike a blow with a crooked stick. And so if Peterson is using secular language, well, that's his religion. It's secularism. But we have the right religion, and we'll use his tools for our purposes. So that's how I see Peterson and anyone else in that milieu. To be honest,
Yeah, but there's people that haven't been reached any other way, right? Despite all the same facilities being available, but Peterson reached them all,
Well,
and nobody wants to own up to that and the significance of it and the importance of it. And that's where the problem.
That's what I was going to ask you, Mark. What group were you referring to that you think Peterson was useful for?
Meaning crisis. Peterson's a meaning crisis guy.
And just a little bit of flesh on that. People who see life as meaningless, who don't have a proper orientation towards a higher good, a higher power, even in let's say, and thereby are experiencing nihilism, despair, existential anxiety, all of these very and perhaps given over to hedonism.
And had no exposure to the church. Like, they had no exposure at all. There are people who have had no exposure at all. And all of them don't like poetry. I think that's not a coincidence. Now, I could be wrong. Oh, no, I'm definitely not wrong about that. This is important. Like, this is why they can't play cards.
I live in and work in Germany, and so it's a very different context when it comes to the Christian church and the much more of a post-Christian reality. And I have gotten to know dozens of people over the last couple of years because of the kind of the Peterson effect. The Peterson phenomenon I think is hard to describe. It's not always something that's easy. Sometimes he gets in the way of it, I think, sometimes. I personally am indebted to him. I'm somebody who grew up Christian, but by watching him and being in part of that, let's say, broader conversation even around him, I have learned a whole new way of talking about faith and religion and church in the broader context, right? And I think, to me, always Peterson represents somebody who is really coming at it from the outside.
Yep.
Okay. He's not coming from a internal space of being Christian. He's trying to figure this out from outside of the church context. And that's why probably for me, the easiest way to understand why he's had such an impact is because there are many on the outside that resonate with him and the questions and the things he grapples with and the things he's really struggling with, because it's an outside of the church conversation that is going on. And just in Germany, we're involved in estuary there, if you guys know about that, and
Mark
so
doesn't like estuary, but keep going.
yeah, but that's the, I would say, the downstream from Peterson is people searching for community and connection to a degree. And that's what estuary has really been thriving on or been part of. And we're all indebted, in a sense, to the Peterson effect to a degree. So not everybody that comes there is conversant in Peterson.
Right.
Not everybody knows about it, but it wouldn't be there without him, I would say. Paul as well. Paul's our kind of patron saint in that sense, but anyway, so I've been personally touched by it. One of my best friends, when I got to know him in the process of him becoming Christian and getting baptized, he always said that Peterson was like John the Baptist for him. not the
Wow.
sense that because he pointed so hard at something, right? And he just followed where Peterson was pointing.
Right.
And I think that is a good way to just kind of maybe not who he is in the role of, like, in terms of his closeness to Jesus. That's what I wouldn't say. But in terms of how people find Jesus through him, right? Is that kind of making way in the wilderness type of thing, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So anyway,
I mean,
that's my little
it's
piece.
Well said.
it's an obvious, as far as I see it, it's an obvious opportunity for the Christian to show how Peterson is borrowing from the Christian worldview. And that's easy, easy to see for the Christian, but for the non-Christian, or we'll say the uninitiated, that's a big leap, because they're, especially in the West. I don't know much about Germany today. My family would disown me. I'm half German, but I'm also half Italian, so I get away with it. But today, in the West, a lot of people have heard a little about church, community, and otherwise, and so they'll flee like the plague, from that discussion. And
Right.
so while Mark is talking about people that are unchurched, this was an old, like, evangelical term, unchurched and overchurched. There are people in the overchurch camp, I think, that flee that just run away and scatter like cockroaches when the lights turned on as soon as someone says Christian or Bible or Christ. But he's given us a set of tools to say, well, okay, let's evaluate your worldview in light of this secular language. It's the same thing Lewis did. It's the same thing Aquinas did. It's the same thing Calvin did. It's the same. Lots of people did that.
As Saint Augustine said, the children of Israel were plundering the Egyptians on their way out of Egypt. Just so we can plunder the riches of the pagan philosophers for the glory of God.
There's a funny. I heard Trenham talk about that. Trenham said he pranked his congregation by giving them Seneca quotes every day, but calling them Chrysostom, and showing how.
Oh, that's bad.
It's really, I think he repented. But the funny part of that is he was talking about the distinction of worldview today and during the time of Seneca, and how even in the time of Seneca, it would have been much closer to, say, Chrysostom, than, like, I don't know, someone today. But if you listen to Peterson and you just took a section of him, you could probably say, well, that sounds like Father Eric's homily or something, if it were just a portion of it,
Right. But for me, the big lesson to learn for the people who understand Christian concepts is, and we kind of went over this earlier in the conversation to some extent, is that you can't understand the worldview of somebody who never had those concepts. And so you may think that John Vervaeke is one step away from converting, or Jordan Peterson is one piece of information away from converting, but they're at the bottom of a very long staircase. And when they're using words, you guys are not talking about the same thing, and you don't know that. But I can see it quite clearly. Thank you very much. Like, well, I mean, we did the test. I mean, Sally Joe, in her brilliance, did the test with Vervaeke years ago. She said, is being good at a Q&A. And it took him like 2 minutes to answer. And that might be okay if the first part of the answer was yes, and let me tell you why. But it was backwards. And that, my friend, is a very red, very large flag for a very big problem. Like, the answer should be yes, and let me tell you why. The answer should not be you very clearly, and we have a recording of this, by the way, talking your way into a yes over 2 minutes. That's a problem. And that's the that roughly is the quickest and easiest way I can tell you the difference between, we'll say, a Christianized worldview, although I prefer Anglo-Cathodoxy, or Reformed, because that works too, worldview, and the worldview of a secularist. Is they do not start from an axiom or have an assumption about the world that being is good. They don't have that. And that changes everything in how, in the words you're using may be the same, but it changes everything in what they're saying. And that actually is really significant, particularly to me, because I can see it, which just annoys me because other people can't. Like, you can't see this, bro. But it points to a significant problem, especially because what have we done? We've taken, in the U.S., we've taken teaching of religion out of schools. We've taken recess to some extent out of schools. We've taken gym out of schools. We've taken music out of schools, and we've taken art out of schools. And those are all the things that convey what Vervaeke would term as, although I might argue incorrectly, participatory knowledge. And that's the kind of knowledge you need to play cards cooperatively. Period. End of statement. It's also the only type of knowledge, but that's a different discussion for another long live stream.
But
Speaking of
the-
Vervaeke, who's going to the Midwesternary? Anybody going here?
I don't
No?
think so. I've been asked multiple times in the chat, and my August just got a little too filled up. Too much
Right.
going on here. Although I do share a little bit of Mark's skepticism with the whole estuary model. I think it's a little too dependent on the strongest personality in the room, and they can probably sway it there. You hope that the strongest personality in the room is somebody oriented towards the good and also running the thing, and in that case, it'll probably be fine. But yeah, I've tried it before, and the results were kind of mixed,
Yeah.
because it was a battle between
Yeah.
me and the guy sitting next to me for the strongest personality of the room. The guy who was facilitating he just he just needed to deadlift, like practice deadlifting for 6 months, and his personality would have become stronger. So
Yeah, I find that my issue with estuary is mostly just I'm not interested in creating more churches. So that's kind of how it feels to me.
Fewer
Is
cults, not more.
it would,
Yeah.
yeah, but I if it's a secular thing, then it's a club, I guess. But yeah, that's kind of where I'm at on that. And also just me personally, I'm not in need of such a thing. So.
Yeah, and I think the problem is people are very confused about the world. Like, a lot of people will defend those little cults, as I like to call them, but I met a friend there, and I'm like, yeah, but I went to a grocery store and met a friend once. Like, this is an event that happens. like if you put people in a room together, or in a place together, these sorts of things that happen online and have been happening online for decades, because I've been online for decades. Happen. This isn't interesting. What's interesting
yeah.
is whether or not you can make something lasting that is also true, good, and beautiful. And that actually requires quite a bit of structure. And
Yeah.
I forget how this came up today, but I guess there's a quote out there about, the longer you want something to last, the more structure it needs. Yeah, that's actually technically correct. You can look at any number of models, right? But all the data you need is there over thousands of years at this point. If you want something to last, it has to have a large structure. Now, that doesn't speak to its trueness, goodness, or beautifulness, we'll say, but it's important to note that hierarchy is older than trees, and you ain't getting around it. And so you better deal with it carefully and know where you are in that structure, which hopefully, if I can ever get my animation to work, I will make clear in an animation and a video.
don't you think the analysis of the structure and how well it all coheres together could be a useful thing? Like, how much of the energy and how much of the structure is actually serving the purpose versus how much is just dead weight?
Father, I have to recommend a good text like this, which will be coming out in September. I don't know what else to tell you. It's all in here, actually. And we're going to make sure it's available in Australia, Jim. Don't worry.
I'll get
once
it.
we release it, you will be able to order.
I'll order it.
Excellent. But like, I think the problem and the kind of the point of my animation is that the way a structure looks and the way a structure operates are not the same thing. And structures all look pyramidal, right? And then when you're in the pyramid, this is the animation. It's going to work just like my last animation. When you're in the pyramid always looks this way, but you're in it. Right? And so you can theorize or fantasize about how it looks from the outside. But that's a fantasy, and it's incorrect, and it's flat. Right? No matter how many dimensions you put it in, it's actually flat because you're only one person. So you can only absorb one tiny person's part of it. Right? But the way it works is totally different. And so, for example, the story I'm going to, maybe I'll tell a different story. I'm telling this story a lot. There was one time in this organization that I was a consultant in, no less, where we as tech support people were forbidden from talking to the engineering team for what might have been very good reasons. They were also my fault, but I don't go into that. Anyway, we were forbidden from talking to the engineering team, and we had a problem that really the engineering team needed to know about right now, and we couldn't talk to them. Like we were like actually forbidden from talking to them. And the CEO, because there were 2 kitchens in our new building, happened to be in our kitchen, and I was talking to one of my fellow people, and I suddenly switched the conversation when I saw the CEO to this problem, and she went and said, "What?" And oh yeah. Well, have you told engineering about this? And we said, we're not allowed to tell engineering right now because we've been banned. I'll take care of it. Give me the ticket number, right? Anyway, I didn't have to tell engineering anything. And so my influence as contractor boy, not full-time employee, was directly to the CEO, guys. Well, how did that happen in a hierarchy? That's not how hierarchies have ever worked.
Hey,
Ever.
Mark, no, it's worse. You're disparaged now for doing that. You went above their heads. You see, like it's not only that it's
right,
there, but it's also aided.
Almost never happens, Bruce. That's the thing.
Yeah,
it does
happen. I know.
But but it's extremely rare that and so people use the rare case and say, "See, this is how hierarchies are tyrannical," and it's the total lie, which just cracks me up. Because who is gonna know that I told the CEO? And because I didn't tell her, we just happened to be talking about it because I switched the conversation to it once I saw her while we were in the break room together. I didn't tell her. It didn't even happen that way, technically speaking, right? Because I'm not an idiot, and I know I'm actually rather good diplomatically and politically when I'm getting paid, and I need to be. I know no one will believe that, but actually, I'm quite a successful player.
I've seen the diplomatic side of Mark. I can testify to it. It is a mode that he can operate in if he feels the need. Yeah. No, and hierarchies are a real funny thing, right? Because, I work for the bishop, and the bishop tells me to prepare and MC liturgies for him. And then when we get in the middle of the liturgy, I'm kind of in charge. He has veto power sometimes, but otherwise he'll do what I tell him to do. And then sometimes, I'll ask him, I'll give him 2 options if we need to make a decision because I forgot to prepare something. And it's like, we going to put everything to a halt while I get that ready, or are we just going to move on and pretend, but it's like this, it's just kind of this balance here where he gives me a job and then he has to actually trust that I do it. Yeah. And without breaking things too much. And that sort of thing happens all the time. Like with my secretary, if she decided to go evil, she could do a lot of damage on her way out. Like we'd set the diocese back like 20 years in terms of, archiving and processes. I'd have to reinvent all of that. It would be such a pain. So I'm glad that she's on the side of the angels because it'd be awful. It'd just be awful. So yeah, hierarchies work like that all the time. The different parts all actually have to cooperate with each other rather than it always being red and tooth and claw competition.
Right. But outside, it still looks like a solid pyramid with someone at the top and people going down. But the influence that people have within that pyramid does not reflect the management structure. And I've consulted for lots of companies, and that's always been the case. And there are like the only company that was an exception to that, maybe, and this isn't entirely true at all, was UPS. And UPS was the best managed company I have ever worked for in my life. And boy, had I known that when I was young, that would have been helpful. Because when I was young, I figured, oh, wow, this is a pretty well managed company. Little did I know I would never work for a company half as well managed as UPS again. Right? And interestingly, what are they? They are a union shop. How interesting. I wonder if there's a connection there. Why all of these things that have to be rigidly hierarchical in order to get work done seem to also correlate with unions. How very strange. I'm sure it's just a random coincidence and has nothing whatsoever to do with exactly what I'm pointing at. Don't worry about it, guys. Go back to sleep. Think of it as a bug. It'll be fine.
Yeah, well, the thing about UPS is what they do is really, really difficult.
You can't lie about boxes.
Yeah, you can't lie about boxes. The last mile of a delivery is the most difficult part. That's why Walmart's overhead expenses are much cheaper than Amazon's. Yep. Because they don't have to get to the last mile. They just have to get their goods to the store and stock them, and then their customers take care of the last mile all on their own. Yeah. So basically, it's a very, very competitive, a very difficult problem to manage. So if they weren't well managed, then the whole thing would have to fall apart, I think, just because of the difficulty of what they're doing.
It would. And because people very rarely sample failure in a marketplace, they don't realize how many companies tried to compete with UPS and failed. There's quite a few bones in that graveyard, right? Like most businesses fail. 90% of businesses fail within the first 5 years. 90%. Everyone goes, well, they're in business, so they must be making money. And I'm like, well, even successful businesses like Amazon, which is never going to make back their initial investment ever, are not profitable. And so this idea that businesses are profitable because they exist is already completely wrong. Amazon is the biggest thing to disprove that. I don't think they had a profitable year until fake news virus scam. I think that was their first full profitable 4 quarters in their existence.
Are you familiar with Sam Francis? The American Samuel Francis. Late Samuel. He actually wrote The Managerial Society. He was a conservative American commentator with Pat Buchanan, Sam Francis, and Joseph Sobral. You heard us, those people.
Buchanan's the only name I'm familiar with.
Joe Sobran, S-O-B-R-I-N. They're conservative, traditional Americans, and that's what he's basically talking. The Managerial Society is the book. It is worthwhile getting, I think. But he died about 15, 20 years ago. But on that very point, what he's simply saying is there's going to be half a dozen of huge mega companies like Amazon, etc., running the whole show, from commercialism to media, etc. It's being centralized, basically. So when you talk about business, the corner store of your grandmother, grandfather selling, Coke or something, or sandwiches, it's no longer around. Not even now. The malls, so-called American malls, are dying out. Everything's being Ubered or whatever you want, delivered, and especially after the pandemic. And it's what I noticed,
that failed in the U.S., Jim. They lost hundreds of billions of dollars on that business.
But what I'm saying is everyone's not even eating out. So I mean, there's been a decrease. People are ordering things home. And not socializing, basically. That's what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
So we're talking about the terms of community. There's no community. We all self-segregated.
There's a lot of that going on. I also think that there's economic turmoil that seems to be in place that makes it difficult for people. And then the large thing that's actually, I think, fueling this issue is actually the incompetency crisis, which is a video that needs to be made.
I made it.
Yeah. I know. That's really, I think, what's going on. It's not even people's willingness to go or unwillingness. It has everything to do with the competency problem. But in the U.S., I think most people, city and rural, are suffering from economic increase of basic things like food and eating out, and regulation that makes it difficult to start business, and the competency crisis. The regulatory issue is huge.
But we're back. So under Barack Obama, probably the most destructive creature to ever walk the earth, we're back to creating more businesses than are being destroyed in the U.S. So we're not going to have another East India Company. I know a lot of people like to theorize about that, and I suggest that they read one history book once ever. The East India Company was larger than the top 10 corporations today by any reasonable measure. And they are responsible for the English Parliament, which was a disaster and continues to be a disaster to this world, and the beheading of the English king. We're not going back there because they couldn't sustain, and they're not coming back. So I wouldn't worry about that. I know that's a big bugaboo for people, particularly in the U.S. That's a ridiculous thesis because the U.S. always had small business growth that was ridiculously high, and we've gone back on track with that, particularly with our current change of presidency. So I'm not too worried about that. We have plenty of healthy small businesses, and they're growing, so it's not that big a deal. But the competency crisis, to Bruce's point, that's a big deal because a lot of people are in a position, who played video games their whole life, and they think they know things about the world, and they are not equipped to be in a business, much less run a business. And that's a big problem if you're bad employees too.
Or even, run a business or even participate in the service industry at all, which is what we're talking about, service industry things. People aren't going to them because, and they're opting for the delivery scenario because the competency crisis is so bad. But whenever someone finds a place that has competent people, one of the most famous examples of this in the past 20 years is Chick-fil-A. It's mobbed with people. I mean, absolutely mobbed everywhere you go. It's closed on Sunday. They're all over the place. They're in malls, hospitals, your grandmother's kitchen, everywhere. Yeah. It's everywhere. And the reason why is because they're so competent and they're streamlined and their hiring process and training is so good that it's a breath of fresh air when they go. That's really.
It's a multinational company. That's my point. Chick-fil-A or KFC or whatever you want to do that.
No, but they're not even the same.
To have a good old Italian, local restaurant, for example, there's not even Italian districts like in New York. It's all dead.
There's an Australian-run coffee company in South Dakota, as Sally's pointed out. I only know this because I've been there.
Which one is that?
It's a small business, but I'm afraid, gentlemen, that we're running into another part of the incompetency crisis here. And that's the fact that I'm incompetent to keep my eyes open for much longer because it's dark outside and I should be going to bed. So, wonderful conversation. Next time. Glad to have you all on here, and good night. God bless you all.
God bless you.
See you later.
See you later. Bye.